welcome Aaron Witt. I believe the self-proclaimed chief dirt nerd. Is that accurate? Of BuildWitt, chief dirt nerd. Is that your official title?
Yeah. I proclaimed it in 2018, and it's just followed me everywhere since. So that's what I'm still rolling with.
It's not a bad title. It's very catchy, memorable, stands out.
Yeah. Well, branding is important. I just one of the big reasons for it was that you go on LinkedIn and everybody's just kind of playing the same game, singing the same tune. And so I was trying to stand out in the early days. So it's like, what makes me stand out? Well, I can just make up a title that's different than anybody else's title. So there we go. And that's what I did. And a lot of people have enjoyed it. And that's like I said, we're just rolling with it.
What I'm interested in is, how did you develop your passion for what you term as the dirt world? Where did that start?
I've always loved heavy equipment. It's just something that's always got me going. Since I was a small child, whenever I see something pushing dirt around, moving dirt, it's a very much like a physical reaction to it. I'm just physically, emotionally, mentally excited about whatever the heck is going on. I'm just drawn to it like a bear to honey. Mm-hmm. And so I, in a way, have just listened to that excitement naturally and have nurtured it over the past few years, especially. And so I've always had it, but I've also put myself in a position where I could grow it and nurture it along the way. Because I do think everybody's excited about something out there, and but a lot of times they just go down other paths that don't necessarily align with that. And I've been fortunate to go down a path that's perfectly in line with it. So, and I was also put in a position growing up, and based on how my parents raised me and what we had growing up, that I could do that. And so when I was 18, I could just sit there and ask myself, what do I want to do with my life? And quite literally choose anything. And so I thought, hey, this construction thing's really cool. I'm drawn to it. I want to be around it more. Why don't I just go get a job in construction? And I had the opportunity to just go get a job in construction. And when I was not raised in a very blue collar area. So, I grew up in Scottsdale, Arizona, so it wasn't exactly blue collar. Mm-hmm. And so, whereas most of my friends, if they would have gone back and told their parents they're going to get a job in construction, they would have just said, no, you're not getting a job in construction. What are you talking about? My parents were just like, okay, have fun. Mm-hmm. And I've just run with it since. So I guess it's always been there, but I've listened to it and I've tried to grow it along the way.
So do you think there's an aspect of wanting to do the opposite? Like you mentioned, you didn't grow up in a blue collar area necessarily. So I think with many of us, there's a desire to do like the opposite of what your parents want for you, or kind of be like, was that rebellious in a way?
No, I genuinely have had parents that my life has just been open book. Mm. So I think they really did their best to give me skills and put me around really accomplished people during my childhood, which was a huge, huge, huge deal. And I'm so grateful for that. Mm. But they've never tried to push me in any one direction. They never told me to go to college. They never told me to do this, to do that. And they've just supported me along the way, which has been extraordinary. And so there's no rebelliousness to it whatsoever. Mm. It's just, I was given the gift that is parents that genuinely supported me in whatever I wanted to do, which I've learned is quite rare. Mm-hmm. And I've recognized that. And so I've tried to make it into something, because if I don't make it into something, shame on me, because not everybody has that opportunity.
Yeah, very good. So did you start as a laborer, like on a construction crew?
Yeah, I was 17 years old, my last year in high school. I was thinking about what I wanted to do with my life. And there was a construction project not far from our high school that popped up. It was in the neighborhood where all my friends lived. And it was a pretty amazing job. And still, I don't see this work very much even today. A 385 excavator, so pretty good sized machine in the middle of the city. Really, really tight street. 100 plus inch concrete pipe, 30 feet deep. It was extraordinary. And it was a bunch of rich people. So everybody was all pissed off about what was going on. But I was just enamored by this project. I couldn't get enough of it. And I was working at an aquarium store at the time. That was my high school job. But on the rare afternoon I wasn't at the aquarium store, I would just go and watch what the heck was going on. And I'd kind of just watch through the bushes. And one day, after watching the trucks go by enough, the box of every truck, there were these beautiful white triaxles, because the excavator, every scoop of material had to go into a triaxle because they didn't have enough room to cast any material anywhere. So every bit of material in this job had to go in and out by truck. And every truck had Pearson Construction Corporation on the side. And I just, after seeing it enough, was like, why don't I just look this company up? And then I looked the company up, and there's their phone number. Why don't I just call them? And oh, it's Mr. Pearson, of course, Pearson Construction Corporation. So why don't I ask to meet with Mr. Pearson? And so I did, and he said, sure, I'll meet with you. And so one day after high school, I go down to Mr. Pearson's office. I can remember it right now. I can visually, mentally sit in his office. I'll never forget it. And I thought it was the coolest thing in the world, because he had these big plan sets scattered around everywhere and scale construction models. And they had equipment in the back because they had their office where their yard was. And I asked him, can I have a job? Because if I had a job on this project, I would get to be around it all the time, and I'd get paid to be around it all the time. And he said, he asked, how old are you? And I said, 17. He's like, no, I can't give you a job. I can't legally hire you. Call me back when you're 18. So I turn 18 in February. I call him back in the spring, and I say, I still want that job. He says, all right, fine. We'll start you as a laborer. So yeah, I just start as a laborer on a pipe crew on the project that I was watching while I was in high school. And so the week I graduate high school, there I am. I buy a garbage pair of boots. I'd never owned a pair of boots before. I'd bought my first pair of jeans, never owned a pair of pants before in my life. I bought some orange shirts, kind of like this one, because I thought that's what construction workers wore. And I just showed up, 4:45 in the morning. It's already hot, Phoenix, Arizona. And so it's just miserable all summer long. And you walk up to the yard, and there's English over here, Spanish over there, cigarette smoke kind of hanging in the air amongst everybody. And I didn't know a single thing. But fortunately, I worked with some really good guys that took me under their wing and showed me some of the ropes. And I said from that summer on, this is the place for me. I don't know where exactly my place is, but I don't need to look at any other industry. This is it.
How long did you work for Pearson?
Just that summer, because I asked the two major questions I asked Rich were, one, what should I study in college? Because going to college where I was and how I grew up was like going from 6th to 7th grade. You don't think about it. It's not a decision to make. You just do it. So the decision is what you should study, not if you should go. And so I asked him, because I didn't know what to study. They don't tell you that in high school. Right. And again, I didn't have my parents telling me, oh, you should go do this or that. So I had to kind of figure it out for myself. And so I asked him, if I want to do what you do, if I want to have a construction company, what should I study? And he said, go to construction engineering school. And then he also said, go work for as many companies as you can, because this is a big industry. It's a big place. And you just don't know what you're into or where you can best serve if you don't get out and experience it. And so he said, don't stick with one company. Try to go work for as many companies as you can. And so all the way through college, I was just rotating my way through companies. So ultimately I worked during the school year and especially full-time, full bore over the summer, but for different companies every year to try to just get as much experience as I could while I was studying.
The way you told the story seemed very natural, but from my perspective, or like an outsider, it's not normal for a 17-year-old to take the initiative to call the owner of a company, speak directly to the owner, ask for a job, and then have access afterwards to ask these questions. It's a pretty special circumstance.
It definitely was, which going back to where I said I was super fortunate, because my parents put me in a school that, it was a private school and everybody's dad was somebody, and everybody's dad was somebody significant. Like all these guys were just filthy rich. And most of them were quote unquote self-made. So they all built whatever they had themselves. It wasn't generational wealth, which was the cool thing about Phoenix, Arizona. Because if you go to a private school like on the East Coast or in different parts of the country, you're going to have that generational wealth. Whereas in Phoenix, it was just guys that had built stuff. And so I was around people that were very accomplished in all different categories my whole life. And so me asking a girl out, even now, is a terrifying thought. But talking to a billionaire is like talking to a friend's dad. There's nothing to it because it's because I've done it my whole life. And so calling a Rich Pearson or having lunch with all the guys that I did while I was in college, it was just natural to me because that's what I'd always done since I was 6 years old.
Interesting. Like, because most people talk about the negatives of being raised in like that kind of an environment where maybe things are handed to you, but I very rarely hear the positives of what you just described. You become to realize that these people are just normal people like anyone else, and they probably don't get spoken to like as normal people. They're put on a pedestal by many.
They are. I think what I took away most. Yeah, most people haven't been around very highly accomplished people because they are insulated. And once you get to that level, you want to be around other highly accomplished people. But me as a kid, it was like the perfect way in. And you get to not just be at these people's office, but you're at their house. Like you're having sleepovers with your friends when you're 8 years old. And so you're just like your friend's dad, you're just living with the guy. And so you don't necessarily pick up like on his business phone calls and meetings, but you're seeing what time he wakes up, how he talks to people, how he talks to people on the phone, how he talks to people in person, what he eats, does he drink? Does he drink a lot? You're starting to get like all of these characteristics of highly accomplished people, and then you have a good enough sample size so you can start to connect the dots. And so while a lot of people fall prey to like the nonsense that is, oh yeah, if you just figure out like here's the trick, here's the hack, here's the shortcut to doing anything great, I haven't ever gone down that path because all I've seen is no, there's no shortcut. No, there's no way to do it without a lot of work. No, most of these guys aren't even that smart on paper, but all they've done is just relentlessly pursue X, Y, Z. And so it was probably like the best education I could have asked for. And then the reason why I think I've been able to escape the downsides of growing up in an affluent world is that by the time I became 18 and went into college, it was like, okay, cool. We showed you what's possible, and now you're on your own. And so there isn't an inheritance. There's nothing for me. There's nothing. And so it's like, if I want that life, if I want those opportunities for my kids, I have to go build it. And so, yeah, I was teed up, but now I'm on my own. And so it's just down to work now.
Interesting. So you go to college, you obviously have the passion for the industry, you get some good advice, you're going to work for as many different companies as you can to be exposed to different aspects. Did you work for any other companies outside of college before starting BuildWitt, or do you graduate college and start building your own thing right away?
So I worked for Pearson for a summer, and then I worked for a larger contractor in town during the school year, my freshman year. I did another summer of being a laborer on pipe crews. Then I went to work for a big contractor on the railroad in California. And then I went to work for an even bigger contractor doing blasting work in Washington. And I was working junior, senior year during school in an estimating office for like a mid-sized contractor that I then went to work for after school. I went to work for them after school because I was able to help estimate the job, which was pretty cool. It was a alternative delivery project. So I was involved in the project for a year before it was even scheduled to begin. It was scheduled to begin right when I graduated. It was a decent sized job. It was like $15 million. So it was enough to see like a good sized construction project, but not too big where I'd be pigeonholed into just counting like silt fence for mile marker here to mile marker here,
right.
and but big enough where things were going on. And it was in a different state. I wanted to go outside of Arizona and just get some out-of-state experience. It was in Texas. So I graduate, and I quickly moved to Texas to go build this job. It was going to be like a 2.5 year project. Perfect. Then I'll evaluate what the heck's going on next. But right before I graduate college, I'm listening to the MF CEO Project, Andy Frisella, for my final years in college. And he's talking a lot about marketing and personal branding. And I sit there thinking, man, how do I do this? How do I build a brand? And then I think, well, I have this brief construction experience. I have these photos. I have these stories. Why don't I start telling them on Instagram? And so I make an Instagram page called BuildWitt, dedicated to just construction stories from my perspective as a young engineer. And that's what I start doing on the side while I'm working in construction. So I'm in Fort Worth building jobs when I'm not working, like in the evenings or on Saturdays. I'm driving around Dallas, Fort Worth, trying to find heavy equipment to take pictures of to post on my page because I ran out of pictures and videos pretty quick. So it's like, man, I need stuff to post. So then I'm starting to take a few pictures here or there around town. And a company calls me, HCSS, software company. They make estimating software. Calls me, Dan Briscoe. And he says, hey, we have a program called I Build America. We want you to come run it. We're trying to inspire the next generation. So I say, all right. And I take a day off. I go to Houston. I hear them out. And it seems like a phenomenal opportunity. I get to go help inspire the next generation. Like, what could be better? So I moved down to Houston. I did the road construction in Dallas for 4 months, and then I go to Houston for 4 months. And it was just, the program was great, company was great. I just had a different perspective on how things should be done and the execution of it all. So I just one day said, I'm just going to go do this on my own. And so I made it 8 months in real life before I quit, moved back in with my parents, and tried to start a company.
Did you have a goal when you were posting these pictures on Instagram? Like, did you have this vision for something, or was it just, like you mentioned, you were doing it on the side? Like, what were you hoping to gain from it?
There was no vision. I think
you were just kind of sharing your love of it with the world, kind of a thing?
Well, no, it was more self-serving than that. I wanted to build my brand because if I knew that if I had a bigger brand online, I could probably have more career options in my 20s. So once this road project finished up, I wanted options, and I thought if I learned how to tell stories and brought people into the company I was working for, the industry, it's going to give me a lot more options. So that was the sole intent when I started. But then I started to see the bigger picture. That's why I Build America was critical, because it showed me that, well, wait a minute, there's this looming challenge, this issue that the industry has, that is all of these retirements on the books that aren't going away. These people aren't getting younger, and how do we backfill them? And so I started to then, at that point, see the bigger picture. And then I started BuildWitt, and I started traveling around the United States and seeing construction all over the place for the first time. And that's when it started to more so come into focus, as far as like, hey, there's actually a huge challenge here. And I think that we can build a business helping alleviate some of it.
And so the original idea when BuildWitt starts is to tell the stories of these contractors who do the work. Is that the original? That was it.
Yeah. It was me. It was a camera. There was nothing else to it. And that was the initial thesis. People I think mistakenly think that it's like, or at least just from my perspective, people mistakenly think that, you're going to be walking down the street one day, this lightning bolt of inspiration strikes you. And like, that's it. That's your $1 billion idea. And then all you have to do is just execute that idea, and you're off, you're set.
Yep.
I just haven't found it that way. I found it to be very iterative. Like, the first step was, I find construction interesting, so I should get a job in construction. Okay, I like construction. I want to make a career out of it. Where should I go in construction? Okay, let's go try a bunch of stuff. All right, I kind of know where I'm going to go now, but I definitely want as many career options as possible. So if I go build a brand, that might open more doors. Awesome. Oh, wow. There's an opportunity to tell stories in this industry to get people in the door. You know, a 16-year-old can't choose construction as a career if that 16-year-old doesn't know construction exists. I didn't know construction existed at 16. Most people don't either. So let's go get the word out. And that was really where the business began. And that's part of the business today, but that's by no means, that's just a small piece of the overall business today. But and I could go, you know, down the next 5 years, 6 years. It's all been iterative.
Sure.
You go try something, you go learn something, and then, okay, cool. Then you go down the next step, next step, next step, next step, next step. And the vision becomes bigger and bigger, and you execute upon bigger things. You have more resources to do things, and then it just builds upon itself. And that's when people see it. It's like, well, how'd you figure that out? It's like, well, I've been chipping away at this one problem since I was 18 years old. And so that's 11 years now that I've been focused on this one issue. And so, yeah, after you focus over a decade on anything, you start to create some kind of progress.
How long did it take you to get your first paying customer?
That was actually quite quick because I had built some relationships before I left HCSS. One of them was with Keaton Turner at Turner Mining Group. He was starting a mining company at the time I was starting my business. And so he was one of my first phone calls after this. And I basically said, hey, let me help you with social media and marketing as you're getting things off the ground. And he gave me a shot pretty quick. And so within, you know, the first 30 days I had paid work. And even if I didn't, I was able to save up quite a bit working in construction in college. And I moved back in with my parents. So I had no living expenses.
Sure.
I just had to feed myself. So the risk was minimal at best.
Sure. Anybody who started a business, you always remember your first customer, right? It just means so much for someone to take a chance on you, you know, and basically to validate your idea, right? It's like, oh, this is somebody who believes in what I'm doing, and, you know, I'm going to put everything into it to make sure they get the return out of it. Yeah.
Yeah. And it was cool. I mean, we had a few companies around the first 2 months that were really trusting, probably too trusting, like LB3, Granite Rock, Rosso. There were a few early on that gave me a shot, and I'm very grateful.
Yeah, that's awesome. There's so much here to discuss because, you know, like all companies, you mentioned that how you started is only just a small percentage of what it has grown into today. You know, how has BuildWitt changed over time? And you know, you described the iterative process, right? I'm sure some of the iteration came from what you would deem as mistakes or things that you tried that didn't work, but you tweaked it a little bit and then it became a success. Like, how has that evolved over time?
No, it's actually just a perfectly straight line, 45 degrees
up and to the right. I hear that all the time.
Yeah, that's been 6 years just up and to the right. I guess to put it somewhat briefly, we started storytelling. The problem with storytelling, though, or not the problem, the constraint is that, and marketing services, is that it's services based. And so you have to go perform the work, and it doesn't scale extraordinarily well. It does with like big picture exposure, like what I do now with social media, but the business itself doesn't scale. And we wanted to go, and still do, wanted to really go impact the entirety of the industry, of the dirt world as we call it now. So we asked ourselves what scales, and that's when we started to get into training and development. And so today we have a software called BuildWitt Training to help companies train their people in bite-sized pieces, 2-3 minutes, on how to inspect an undercarriage of an excavator, how to put on, how to lay a piece of pipe, how to use a saw safely, how to do various things when it comes to safety, how to take care of your mental health, how to take care of your physical health, all kinds of personal type things as well. And then, all right, cool, you know, we're bringing people in the door, we're attracting them with storytelling, we're getting them trained up, we want to keep them. And that's when the Dirt World Summit, the area Dirt World Summit came into play last year. It'll be again this year. And that's really focused on leadership. How do we retain great people? And also how do we attract, train them as well? But we're really ultimately, no matter what we're doing in business, just positioning BuildWitt as like the middle ground for the dirt world, because as of right now, there just isn't one. And I think that's a key issue is you have the contractors over here all trying to do their thing, equipment manufacturers up here doing their thing, service providers over here, project owners, associations, like everybody's trying to just go at the exact same problem, but from their own way. And until as an industry, we're all able to just, hey, let's all come together. Let's all get in one room. Let's all talk about this. And then let's agree that this is the direction we're going to go in. Until that happens, I don't see significant progress happening. But it's starting to happen now, which is really exciting.
Did you have customers asking for your help on training, or is that something that you identified as a big gap because of your lengthy experience working for contractors yourself?
It's a little bit of both. I'm a big believer that the customer is not always right, which I learned from Jobs. Like Jobs was very adamantly against customer feedback in a lot of ways because his argument was that it guides you in the wrong direction. And when you're, and not to give us too much credit, but I feel like when you're truly innovating or trying to innovate, you're basically trying to go create something that doesn't exist. And so if you rely too much on feedback, that's really just focused on what exists today, what is the reality, whereas we're trying to live in the tomorrow and the future. And so I think a lot of it, most of it was based on real customer data and having hundreds of conversations, probably thousands of conversations, and making thousands of observations on job sites about what's going on and what the fundamental issues are, looking at our strengths and what we have to bring to the table, creating a product, and then getting it out into the world and iterating and incorporating customer feedback. But I don't think it was ever like one company saying, hey, if you just built this, we would buy it. It wasn't that simple.
Customers in this industry, I don't know, in my experience, have been very tight-lipped about what they're doing. Like not necessarily wanting to tell the world what they're up to. Have you encountered that? Like, because your business is built on telling their story, and it seems a lot in my mind based on like paranoia that if my competition's going to learn how I'm doing certain things and it's going to make things more difficult for me, or maybe just the profile of the business owner in this industry is just less likely to, maybe they see it as boasting. I don't know if that's the best term for it, but it's just my experience. It's been more of that kind of attitude. Is that something that you encountered?
100%. Yeah, I after going to as many job sites as I've been to, I've seen a greater cross-section of this industry than most people, I would say, even in my very young age. And I joke with people all the time. It's like, I could probably count on my one hand things that I've truly seen that are like groundbreakingly innovative, that are a huge competitive advantage.
Right.
But otherwise, laying pipe. Like you're working off the same specifications and plans that anyone else is in that area. And moving dirt's moving dirt. You're picking it up with a bucket and you're putting it in a truck. And all these people, they'll say, it's not actually their techniques. It's not actually their equipment. It's their people that make all the difference. And so I just actually made a post about this today. In my first few years of business, I was really frustrated because I was trying to teach old dogs new tricks, so to speak. I was trying to convince them of the value of storytelling. But as of now, I think we're really just focused on the early adopters, those that get it, and we're using them as the example. And then once those people that see that example be proven out to be correct, to be something of value, then people come along. And so I've spent most of my time now just focused on elevating those that want their story to be told, and then it brings people along. Some people will finally say, all right, fine, yeah, you can come over here and tell our story too. That's pretty cool. And then there's going to be other people that just don't want any part of it. But I don't think that model will survive, no matter how long they've been building things, no matter what their balance sheet looks like. I just don't see that model succeeding into the future. But as of right now, I'm just focused on the companies that do want their stories to be told, which is honestly a lot of them now. Mm-hmm. Like that was one of my biggest issues 6 years ago was access. I couldn't get in anywhere. And now the access we have is remarkable. And so it has changed significantly. It's still not nearly what I would hope it to be. And that's most of my time, honestly, is just trying to get access and approvals to stuff still. Mm-hmm. But it's getting there, and we've had a lot more success just focusing on the companies that invite us in.
Yeah, I mean, you touched on something. I've made this mistake personally, the desire to convince. And it's just a lose every time situation. But you just, because when you believe in something too, you know that it can help whoever you're talking to. But whenever you're focused on convincing, there's just people that it doesn't matter what you say or what you can do. It's not the right archetype for what you're offering. So it's always better to focus on who you term the early adopters. And there are enough, but it's just hard with human nature to do that.
Yeah, and now I can kind of play chess too, and so it's like if one company doesn't let me on their site, I can probably just go to their competitor, yes. And their competitor probably will.
Exactly.
And
yes,
so
that is three-dimensional chess.
I do play with it a little bit. Yeah, I mean we have a platform now, yep. and I'm not afraid to wield it in a positive way. But it's like, okay, cool. If you don't back at even just a few years ago, it's like, a company with this machine would be really valuable to me because I don't have access to that machine everywhere. Mm-hmm. But now it's like, okay, cool, you have one, but I also know a guy down the street that has one. And so you can kind of play that game too a little bit.
I'm a novice with marketing. How did these companies who hired you, especially in the early days, how did they know that they were getting value? Was it as simple as, hey, we increased your followers and this by this percentage? Like return on investment is such a difficult thing, I think, to assess marketing.
It's, there's a few different ways you can try to explain it, but honestly, based on what I found, it's just anecdotal for a construction company. Mm-hmm. It's based on the feeling that you give an owner. Like some of the best results I've had are honestly like an owner's child, a son or daughter, saying that they saw their stuff on Instagram or whatever it is and that it looked really cool. Mm-hmm. And they feel cool as a result. And it sounds silly that someone would pay that much for something like that, but it's like that is branding, that is marketing, and if your child thinks it's cool, there's other young people that probably think what you're doing is cool, and then you end up with a better workforce. And so we have tracked metrics, and there is a bunch of that, and I'm way oversimplifying the value, and honestly, I'm not involved as much in that part of the business mm-hmm. as I was once before, but a lot of it really is just anecdotal in a big world like this. And if I'm selling shoes are very inexpensive. Mm-hmm. They're $100 each, and so I really need to make sure that I'm selling a lot of shoes for a marketing campaign to pay off. But in heavy construction, if I help them win a $50 million job they wouldn't have got otherwise, and then the margin on that is 5% or whatever it is, you're paying for it ridiculously fast. Or if the average employee for a mid-sized company brings in hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars every year, you just have to help these companies attract one person, two people, three people for it to cover the investment. So because the dollars are so big in this world, you don't have to create that big of a difference to ultimately drive a significant difference when it comes to dollars.
So, I mean, did your clients see an increase in employment applications at these companies too? Is that something that came about as well because of the attention and, like you said, the brand building?
Definitely. Yeah. And I think if you if we were to rattle off the companies that aren't like a BuildWitt, that are historically known, but if we were to rattle off like the well-known companies in the United States right now in civil construction, we've touched most of them. And I think that that's because we've helped them build that great looking brand that they can then stand on and build upon. And who doesn't want to work for a company that looks great and is great? I think everybody wants to be a part of that. And so not that that's like, all you have to do is just make everything look good. Like, we're just doing the easy part. They've already built a great company. They're already investing in their people. They already do great work. They already have great equipment. They already have all of that. We're just putting it all in this really nice package that looks nice and that they can articulate. And then once they articulate it correctly, you can start to be really effective on your recruiting. And using tools like social media, I think a lot of construction companies, even today, they just recruit based on their market. And the reality of how the world works is that you don't just have to recruit on your market anymore. You can, if you're working on the East Coast, you can recruit from the West Coast. There will be people that will move across the United States to work for a great company.
Yep.
And if you have that great marketing, great storytelling, great brand, that's the kind of stuff that starts to happen pretty quick.
People who follow you, it's pretty clear that you do an insane amount of traveling. Is that what have you learned from your travels? Like, what stands out?
I guess the more I travel in the dirt world, the more I love the dirt world. I've seen a lot of other industries. Like I said, we had parents and they were in real estate, and my dad was a lawyer, big corporate attorney, and these parents owned different professional sports teams, and these were in, high class cars. I mean, we had some pretty flashy stuff. But the more I've just been around the dirt world, the more I've fallen in love with it, because it really does make the world go round. Nothing would happen without this industry. The foundation of society is built upon the dirt world. We wouldn't have warmth without this world. We wouldn't have transportation. We wouldn't have internet. We wouldn't have power. We wouldn't have water. We wouldn't have the ability to flush the toilet and get rid of our feces every day. Like, simple stuff that we've always taken for granted would not exist without this world. And I just fall in love more and more and more with the work, but more so the people, just the level of humility and hard work and day in and day out that these people put in. I just absolutely love. And I think another thing that's in that vein that stuck out to me is, no matter where in the world I go, no matter what language is spoken, what religion is practiced, where we are, no matter that, everybody in this industry is really proud of what they do, and that pride is universal, and it to me is just so attractive. It just draws me in, because there's a lot of people, and I'd say most people, they just float through life like a plastic bag in the wind. They have no idea what they're contributing to the world, if anything. And it's terrible to watch. Whereas these people, it's not fun every day. They might not be having a great time all the time. They might even be working for a terrible company. There's a lot of bad companies in this industry, like there are any other industry, but they at least can look back on the work they just did and say, I did that. I put in my 8 hours, 10 hours, 12 hours plus, whatever it was, and I created that value in the world. I impacted the world in that way, and you can't take that away from somebody. So I get more and more excited about it every day, and I just want to tell that story even more.
Yeah, and I think, unfortunately, that's one of the things that is missing so much, is we don't seem to remind, like, our country about the importance of these everyday things we take for granted. We can talk about the labor shortages. That's why you started your business, right? To tell the story of the industry and how important it is. Why do you think we just have not told the story and educated people on all the different aspects of our daily life are touched by the industry?
I just think it's quite fascinating when you think back and think through human history. Like, the world we live in today didn't really even exist pre-World War II, which was less than 100 years ago. And so for hundreds and thousands of years, humans lived in this one way. And then comes globalization that just connects the whole world almost overnight and just changes the game on everything. But that's the only world we've known. The only world I've ever known is one that if I flip the switch on the wall, the lights come on. And if they don't, something's seriously wrong. Like there must have been a storm or something, but that is just a constant. It's like the sun rises in the east, sets in the west. It's just how it is. And so I flush the toilet, my toilet always flushes. I turn the faucet on, the water always comes out. If I have to drive somewhere, I've got roads to do it. I don't even have to think twice about it. And so I don't think we've educated people about it because we're just so far removed from it, and we view it almost as like a constant of the human condition today. But it's not an accident. It doesn't just materialize, doesn't magically appear, but it kind of does in a way, because if the dirt world's not telling that story, who is? Nobody. It's not like CNN's going to be like, what we need to be talking about right now, just how important these construction workers are. Because thank goodness, if we didn't have them, we couldn't have the studio and we couldn't have the road I drove on this morning. They're not going to do that. No one's going to do that. And so that's been my point to not just construction, but mining. It's like, if you don't tell this story, no one else is going to tell this story. There's not going to be like this superhero that just comes into your office one day and solves the problem for you. It doesn't exist. No one cares. Everybody's focused on them right now. And we can sit here and complain all day long, or we can say, man, this is a pickle. This is kind of a pickle of our doing because we haven't told the story, and we better start quick, or else we're just going to get run over like we have been for decades now. And so
with like I mentioned, you travel. Is there a different dialogue in other countries? I was listening to you. I forget who it was with, but just talking about the percentage of investment in infrastructure in our country, how low it is compared to other nations. They spend a much higher percentage of their GDP investing in infrastructure. Is there more dialogue in those other countries about the importance and why they're investing in it that is different than here?
Again, it comes back to how close you are to it. We're in a developed nation. And so the amount of infrastructure we're building is not that much in the grand scheme of things. We're more in like a maintain kind of status right now, where we're just keeping up what we have. We're not exactly adding a lot of new stuff. And it's such a big country. We're 350 million people, somewhere in that ballpark. I don't know what the exact figure is, but well over 300 million. It's still, you've got a few million people working in construction. A lot of them are minorities. A lot of them are immigrants. So it's even a smaller percentage of your overall population. And so the odds of you even knowing somebody in construction are quite slim. Whereas in a developing nation, all that is happening is the building of infrastructure, because that's how a nation develops. You have to connect the dots. You have to build cities, build roads, build rail networks, water networks, shipping. All that is happening is building. And so the society is much closer to that. And I think what you were referring to is like mining in Australia. Mining is a significant percentage of Australia's GDP. There's a large percentage of Australia's population involved in mining. So the odds of me knowing somebody in mining while living in Australia are quite high, which means that I at least think about mining. I at least have opinions about mining. I at least have somebody in that world that I might be exposed to. Whereas right now where the States is, we're just not around it all the time. I mean, I didn't think about construction as a job until I was 17, 18, not because my parents were sitting there saying, oh, that's a bad job. It's just because I didn't think about it. It's not even presented as an opportunity, because that's just not the world I was in. I was living in a city. Cities are developed. I'm not around construction all that much. And so I think that's the bigger problem. It's like everybody's saying, oh, this negative perception, this and that. Yeah, do I think the perception of construction is great? No, I don't think it's great. But I don't really think that that's the problem. I just think construction's not even on the radar. And again, how can I fault a 16, 17, 18-year-old kid for not choosing an industry they don't know exists? It's not their fault.
Yeah, interesting. What do you see as like the long-term vision for BuildWitt right now? You mentioned the different areas that evolved into training. You now have live events like the Dirt World Summit. Is there additional things that you have on your roadmap to offer that you're working towards?
Oh, we have plenty of rabbits in our hat. It's just a matter of if we can find them. I know they're in there, though. I think our goal is it is and has been since probably the first year of business to be the most influential business in the industry. I don't think we'll ever be the biggest. I don't think we'll be going toe-to-toe with Caterpillar from like a revenue standpoint and this and that, but I think we can be the most influential. I think we can be the business that really gets the industry together, rowing in one direction, and that's the goal. And we're going to do that through storytelling. We're going to do that through software. We're going to do that through events. We're going to do that through maybe other products that I don't even know about right now, because like last year's event, November, it wasn't even an idea January 1 of that same year. And so as we learn, things might change. The business will undoubtedly change, adjust, but I think the constants are we're here to make the dirt world a better place. We're here to serve the dirt world. And we want to be the most influential player, really helping to unite the industry, helping to accelerate the exchange of information, and ultimately helping this industry just overcome the workforce challenge so that we're not going to every association meeting year after year talking about workforce. We can then talk about how do we build better infrastructure and how do we spend our dollars more efficiently and how do we focus on XYZ, because we're now not in the survival mode that is, I just need workers now. Once we get out of that, we can start thinking further and further ahead. So I think that's where BuildWitt's going.
That's what I've been told is what's called a big, hairy ass goal, which is always good to have. Do you ever get frustrated at the speed of change in the industry? I mean, you have a ton of passion, you have a ton of energy, you have a mission that's very admirable, and obviously you come across as a doer. Do you get frustrated by the pace of change and adoption?
I'm frustrated all the time. Like I'm frustrated today, frankly. I'm just been in like a pissed off mood today because I don't know, you just make so much progress and then you have just things that happen and it makes you feel like, are we getting anywhere? This is just stupid. And it's not even right now, it's not even big stuff. Like I was thinking before this, like, why am I pissed off today? I don't even have like a good reason to be pissed off. I'm just pissed off.
Do you have kids?
What's my deal? No, I have no kids. I have nothing.
Right.
Like I have no reason to be pissed off. And so, yeah, I get frustrated, but I've also just come to accept that is just part of it. It just takes time. And I've accepted that more today than ever before, but I'm also under no illusion that I just have like an indefinite amount of time. So it's like the best term I've heard for it, and I don't know where I heard this, but it was like aggressive patience. Like you're still aggressively attacking the target, but you also know that patience is part of the equation, and that's just how it works. And so I've tried my best, the most that somebody in their 20s can, to just accept that time is part of the equation while also trying my best to make progress.
You clearly are. I don't want to use the term influencer because I think that has a negative connotation. Like you're building a business and you are, I would consider, probably the chief storyteller in the industry. What do your parents think about where you are today? And is it like, holy shit, look at what Aaron has already built?
It's funny because I don't think they really get it because it's not like I can, if I were to go build a widget, I would at least be able to show them the widget. I would be able to demonstrate to them, like take it to their house and show it to them.
They haven't come to the Dirt World Summit.
And maybe, well, I'm going to have my mom there.
All right, there we go.
That was going to be my point.
Yeah.
Like, and then, take them to the warehouse one day. We're growing. Like, look at all the widgets I have.
Right.
Wow, that's so many widgets. And oh my God, like, wow, there's one in every single one of these boxes. Yeah, it's crazy. They don't really get it. And I don't fault them for that because it's not something that I can just show somebody. And so I invited my mom to the summit for this year for that reason, because I think once she attends, I think it'll make a lot more sense. Like, oh wow, so this is like, you guys did this. Like, yeah, we did this.
Very cool.
And then it'll make sense. But I don't think they're surprised. I just tell them, it's like, this is what you raised me to do. I'm just doing it. You gave me the play. I'm just running the play. And so all I am is doing my part.
That's awesome. I had Benjamin Holmgren on, and he knows you probably just as well as anybody. And I asked him, I said, what should I ask Aaron? Like, what's something to ask him? And he said, he thought about it for a little bit, and he says, ask him how exercise has impacted his business life. So directly from Ben's advice, how has exercise impacted and changed you, like your day-to-day in business?
Since the second year in business, so almost for 5 years now, I've worked out every single day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. I haven't missed a day. No matter where I am in the world, no matter how tired I am, no matter how sore, this and that. And it's not always like a 13-mile run. If I'm just feeling terrible or whatever, I'll walk, I'll do something physical, but it's always something. It's mostly about the discipline. And I can't even think about what the business would be like if I wasn't as healthy as I am, because I can't imagine life not like this. Like, I don't even know how people do this when they're not mentally and physically and emotionally healthy, or when they're heavily drinking every day. I honestly don't know how it's possible, because for me, it's like, I could not be in like a more peak state right now than I am. And I feel like I am just at the limit. And so if I didn't have this much to give, I think I'd be able to do like half of what I'm doing. And so the physical side is really, really important, just for the sake of keeping me healthy, but also maintaining a healthy sense of discipline that then bleeds into business and the rest of my life. I eat really well. I haven't drank this year, which has been awesome. I don't do any drugs, or I sleep 8-9 hours a night. I'm in a really, really good state, because I know I have to be in that state to then travel the world like I do, and to go do the schedule that I do, and to be there for the people within our business. And so for me, I just view it as like, it's like doing my taxes. Like, I can't just tell the government, I just don't feel like it. Like, no, it's just part of having a business is doing my taxes. I feel like if I want to have the impact that I do on the industry and build the business that I want to do, this is just a requirement. I have to be this healthy and this dialed in mentally, and or else it's just not going to happen.
Do you typically do it like first thing in the morning? Is that like the habit? Is that get up early, go do it?
Yeah, which is really nice, because I feel like maybe it was from Goggins eventually, but he says it's like wringing out the rag.
Yes.
And so it's like first thing in the morning, you just wring it out, and then the rest of the day, I don't get wound up. I really don't get too worked up.
Well, that's what I was going to say, because Goggins says you're not pissed because you just went through the workout, but you said that you've been frustrated today.
Yeah.
What about the rag today?
I'm frustrated about but I'm not like, I'm pretty level-headed from like an emotional stand. Like, I don't really react all that easily, because I think part of it is just because I'm so worn down from whatever I did that morning that I'm able to just go through the day in a much more even state.
Yeah, I share that desire. Like, those habits have always been very important to me. I like the early morning because it's peaceful, and you just feel like you get a head start on everybody else and a head start on the day. And things like I'm better prepared to handle things that don't go well if I've got that under my belt in the morning. It's just like checking off the box, like, all right, I did something hard, and now nothing is going to kind of overwhelm me the rest of the day.
Yeah, I mean, like, yesterday I got a long run in, so I'm training for something, so I did a half marathon. Rest of the day, I'm not feeling bad about myself. I did a half marathon today. I'm feeling great all day, and it's just like, hey, if I can do that, I can do anything. This is fantastic. And so I could sit here and talk for probably 6 hours about the benefits. I think the biggest benefit, though, is just developing a sense of discipline, because if nothing else, it's built into me like a feeling and a desire and an understanding that it's about a little bit of progress every day. But you have to do things every day. And so regardless of the circumstances, like I really didn't want to work out this morning because I was so sore from the run I just talked about. And then from the other things I did before that, it just kind of compounded. And this morning, I just wasn't feeling like it. But that's how life works. You don't feel like it most days. Like I don't feel like building a business a lot of days. Honestly, I love it. I couldn't imagine myself anywhere else. But there's a lot of days where I don't feel like it, and I just want to stay in bed. But that's not the point. It's like you still have to go out and do it, even if you don't want to feel like it, which is a lot of the days. And so that's what exercise has taught me is even if you don't feel like it, even if it's raining, even if it's cold, even if you're tired, even if you're in a weird place, just go do it, because that level of discipline then helps you with your entire rest of your life.
We're coming up kind of at the end. I have one selfish question to ask of you. Because now, how many employees do you have?
We're probably like 65.
When did it change where you probably you weren't involved or have any input on the people that you hire? Like, when did that change? And then how did you ensure that your company, like the people were bringing in the right type of people that would fit like the BuildWitt culture? So that's something that as our company grows, I'm going to be less involved in some of those decisions.
We still have not got hiring right. So I'll just say that. Like I just had a conversation about this Friday. Like, hey, yeah, this is a flaw in our hiring process. We've got to figure this out. This is our fault, not their fault. We made a mistake here. And so I think that's one of the biggest things I've learned is that there's a process to hiring. You can design a process for hiring, like you can design processes for anything else. I think people make the mistake of thinking hiring is just hiring. And so you hire the right person to do the hiring. And then, well, I've just hired the right person for it. And we just need to do some hiring. Problem solved. I think it's more so when done right, like an iterative process. And so I think one of the best things we've done is we've defined our values, our culture, what we're after, so that we can then give the person who's doing the hiring that information to inform the process. We have built a brand, so we don't struggle to attract people. We actually have the opposite problem right now where we have to turn off positions after like a day, 2 days, because we just have hundreds of applications because of the brand that we've built, which has been very helpful from a hiring standpoint to just get the applicant flow. And then we found right now we have a great person leading that, and it's an iterative process. And so I still am involved in iterating on the process and hearing about what we're learning and how we're doing things and giving my input. I'm just not involved in the day-to-day anymore. And so I would say we've defined the culture, the values, who we're trying to hire. That's huge. And we're still adjusting that. We've built a brand to get the flow of applicants, which is really, really big time. And then we've tried our best to really invest in developing a great process. And we understand that process is never going to be perfect. It's always going to be changing because our business is always changing. And so who we need to fulfill the different things in our business is always changing. And so if I'm able to continue building that brand, continue informing where our culture needs to go, where our business needs to go, putting my 2 cents in on the process here or there, it should ultimately end up in a good place.
Very good. Well, I really appreciate you giving your time to come on the Heave podcast. We'll see you at the Dirt World Summit. Our team will be attending for year number 2, so we're looking forward to that. Who are the guests this year? I know you had, was it Jocko last year?
Yeah, we have some really. I'm really excited. And so the 2 guys that kick off the event are Chad Wright, who's a former Navy SEAL, and I've trained with him a few times, and he's the real deal. He's not He doesn't have the brand that Jocko does, but he's the real deal.
Is he the one who did that, the race? I think I watched it on Netflix where it's just you run until no one else can run anymore. Is that what it is?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
Well, what's the name of that race?
He has a big beard.
Yes.
They're called last man standing races.
Yeah, it's in like the Tennessee mountains or something.
Yeah. I saw the movie that was about him doing the 250-mile race in Arizona, which was also great. But he's the real deal. And then Jesse Itzler, who I referenced before,
that's awesome.
They'll kind of be talking together too, which should be pretty cool because they're friends. And so that's going to be spectacular. But then we also have some great people from the industry, like a Herb Sargent from Sargent Corporation. Talking about how they're developing their people. And so it's going to be a really good blend of people from the outside focused on leadership or hiring practices or whatever it is, and then top people we found from the industry that we think are great leaders, great examples, coming in and talking about what they're doing as well. So we learned a lot from our first time last year. This year will be twice as good.
Yeah, well, last year was fantastic. I thought it was great. So yeah, if it's going to be improved from last year, I can only imagine what it'll be like this year. So very good stuff.
We'll have fun. I'm glad you'll be there.
Yep. Very good. Well, thank you again for your time, and appreciate the chance to sit down and talk to you for a little bit.
Sure thing.
Thanks, Aaron.